in our previous tutorial, and you'll see I imported a model here in this scene that doesn't really matter. In fact, why don't I just go ahead and hide that because it's not useful. It was for something else I was doing. Okay, so in the previous tutorial, we got physics set up, and we have everything kind of working. But at this point, what we want is we want to be able to have either the object that we've created here interact with the world around it, right? Let's say we want this to come down, and if it hits a domino, we want that domino to disappear when that collision occurs, right? Rather than just hitting it and knocking it over, we want dominoes to disappear. But we don't want this when it collides with the ramp or the floor. We don't want those things to disappear. We just want the collisions to happen here. And then eventually, the other thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to be able to control something in the scene, right? We want to be able to either have control, let's say the sphere is our player object. We're like a marble that has, I don't know, it's alive and it knows things about the world around itself, and it can navigate rather than just be, a slave to physics. So we're going to want to be able to move those things around and control those things. And so that's where the interactivity starts to come in. And so this is our first scripting demo. And what we're actually going to do, Unity just incorporated this new system called Bolt. It's a visual scripting editor and language and graph system that allows you to not write any code, but essentially access everything that you could access through code, but do it through a node-based system. And if you know what that means, great. If you've used, say, Rhino and Grasshopper, it's very similar. And there's many other places where there's these, now it's all the rage to have these node-based ways to kind of connect different events together, right? So, and so I haven't used this before, and so I've been experimenting with it. It seems like it makes sense and works, pretty well. And so, initially for this course, I was going to be showing everyone how to script in like a text editor. However, with Bolt, a lot of the frustrations of coding will be eliminated. There are going to be plenty of other frustrations that are still there as you start to do this, but hopefully we can work through these things together as we go forward. But one of the nice things about doing this in nodes rather than actually writing scripts is we don't have to worry about syntax, right? Syntax is one of the things in programming that is necessary for the computer to know what you mean. But it's also one of the places where it's so easy to make a minor mistake that'll bog you down. Like if you forget a semicolon somewhere, or you forget a squiggly bracket, or you put something in the wrong order, then it's not going to work. Whereas with the visual scripting, all of those little things are kind of taken out of the equation. And so you can still hook stuff up wrong and have it not function the way you want it to. But it's not going to fail because you made some tiny error that in the larger scheme of things isn't important. And so this is a really rapid way to make things as well. There's certain stuff you won't be able to do with it, but for what we're trying to do in this course, it should cover pretty much every use case. And if you're wanting something more advanced, we can talk about that. We can either create a custom node, or maybe you actually have a programming background and you can come in and write a custom script for what you need to cover. Okay, so that was a really long intro to this. Let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we need to do, and I've already done this, so you'll have to listen as I go through this, but the first thing we want to do is we need to get to the asset store. And so the asset store, for a long time, what you would do is you would come up to Window, and you would come down to Asset Store, and you would open the Asset Store here, and this is where you'd find all the assets. However, apparently it was, and I know this for a fact, it was really slow, and it made the editor not work. And so now you just go through a browser to get there. So I'm just going to click on Search Online, and that should open up whatever my default browser is and open up an Asset Store window. Now, you can see I'm already logged into the Asset Store, and going this direction, I believe it takes your credentials because you have to be logged in to use Unity anyway. And I think it just migrates your credentials over here. If not, you should just be able to log in with the same credentials you've got. And so now the asset store is a pretty amazing thing, right? It's got a bunch of paid assets where you can pay hundreds or thousands of dollars for things, or it's got a whole bunch of free assets as well. And, you know, there's everything from, you know, this is like a 3D game kit. So it has just a ton of, you know, assets somebody else has made. And we'll talk about whether or not I feel that's appropriate for the work we're doing in class. You know, it will definitely speed things up, but we'll talk about where's that, you know, making somebody else's a game with someone else's artwork versus making something that's your own. And we'll have those conversations as the course goes on. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the top free assets because I believe it's right there. And if it's not, it may be, oh, it's grayed out for me because I've already purchased it. So in my case, it's 2 lines down. You could also just search for Bolt, but it's free, right? It's published by Unity. You can see mine says purchased already because I've already done that. So if I click on this, it gives me some things, blah, 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 blah. But what it, you know, usually what this has is either a purchase or a download option here, right? But I've already purchased it, so, and it's already installed. So you go ahead and you click on that, and in my case, it's, you know, it says open in Unity. But once you do that, what we need to do is come over. So you're going to click on the button here. It'll prompt you to download it, or, you know, whatever. You go ahead, you click download, and it'll download your stuff. Then when we come back over to Unity, what you need to do is you need to go to Window, and you want to go to Package Manager. And under Package Manager, there are a couple of options, and I don't remember which way it starts out, but the way they're doing things now is anything that you download from Unity or from the asset store ends up coming into this thing called the Package Manager. And a package is basically just, you know, it could be a library of functions and things. You can kind of see this list here. There's this new input system. There's this thing called Cinemachine, which is awesome in terms of making, like, using Unity to make animated films. There's like 2D animation packages, you know, a PSD importer, right? There's a bunch of stuff here. And all of those things add functionality to Unity. Now, typically, most of those packages are on a project-by-project basis. So you need to install the like if you're using a package, you need to install that package per project. And I'm not sure if Bolt's the same way because I've just installed it and I've just been using this one scene, right? But usually per project you need to download it. What's nice about that is you can download what you need and you don't have all of this stuff for every single project. But it means that you do have to download things again if you create a new project. So what we're going to do is there's this packages, and mine says packages Unity registry right now. But what you want to do is you want to switch to My Assets. And My Assets is where anything that you download from the asset store and shows up. And so you can see these are all the things that I've downloaded for previous projects or previous tutorials. And so Bolt is the one that you would want. And right now, what may happen is it may have your download button may be visible. If that's the case, go ahead and click download, and you're going to have to wait for a bit for it to download. And then what you want to do is after that gets done, you want to click import. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to close the project I'm working on and open a new project so that we can so I can import this into the new project. Okay, so I've created a new scene, a new project. So I'm going to go ahead and try to install this in this new project. So I am going to go to my window. I'm going to pull open my package manager again. Now you should be able to do this into your current projects, right? This is just because I haven't used it previously. So I'm going to go to My Assets. It's going to refresh. I'm going to select Bolt, and I'm going to go ahead and click Import. Now, when I do that, what it does is, and this happens with every time you import a Unity package, right? It basically says, do you want to import all the crap that this package has? Sometimes you do, and sometimes if it's some huge multi-gigabyte asset pack, you really just, maybe you just need a few things. You don't need all the stuff. But I'm going to import everything. I'm just going to click Import, and it's going to do its importation. Okay. So I've imported that, and so now what are the changes that have happened, and how do I use this? So I'm going to go ahead and close my package manager. I'm going to go up to the top window here, and there should be under Tools now there's this option to install Bolt. So I'm going to go ahead and click Install Bolt, and once I do that, it actually requests another Unity package. And I'm going to go ahead and click Import again. This, you can see, has a bunch more stuff in it. The first one was just basically like an installer that had like a subset of all the stuff you need. So I'm going to go ahead and import this. It will take a bit of time. It may look like it's frozen at some point, but it's probably not. It just takes a while for certain scripts and files to be installed. Okay, so it has installed now, and now there's this Bolt setup wizard. And so we're going to go ahead and set this up. So I'm going to go ahead and click Next. And there are two options for naming. And what this is each one of the little, they call them units, but they're the little things that do stuff in Bolt that you then connect with you basically, take a wire from one into the other to get the output of one thing to go into an input of another. And they have a human naming system or a programmer naming system. For me, because I've done a lot of programming in Unity, the programmer naming system is a lot easier, right? It's int instead of integer. There's some odd looking text here, but basically everything is a lot shorter than the naming of the human naming. And so I am going to continue to use the programmer naming, and I think we should use that as a class, because one of the things it does is by having things listed like this, it allows you to go to scripts. Because Bolt is so new, there's going to be a lot of cases where there might be a tutorial that has a script or shows you how to write a script for something but doesn't show you how to do the same thing with Bolt. And if you at least know how these different things look in code, which is almost exactly like this, it may help you debug or figure out how that works and how you can apply it to your project. So I'm going to say we go with programmer naming. And if it's really frustrating for everyone, we can change. But I'm going to go ahead and select programmer naming. And then with this next one, I'm leaving all of that at the defaults. And the same with this. I'm going to leave this all at the defaults as well. It basically allows you to change what these things look like, what the logos and stuff look like. We're not going to worry about any of that. We're just going to click Generate. And then it'll take it a little bit of time to generate this code, stuff. And this is something where we can go back in later and change it if we need to. Okay, so we have completed all of those steps. Now, the next thing we can do is if we go to configuration, that's where we would essentially go back to the beginning of what we just did, and we could choose human readable instead of programmer. We can either close this or we can click on the manual link as well. So I just want you to note that now up at the tools, now there's this subcategory for Bolt. And there's an about, there's a link to the manual, there's a link to the setup wizard. You can apparently update the wizard as well. Or there's an update wizard, so as updates come out, we can update our stuff. There's configuration and a bunch of other stuff that we don't need to worry about right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this. And so now when we're starting to code and work with this visual scripting language, there's several things we need to do to set this up. And then once we set this up, that's the end of this tutorial, and the next one will actually create our first script. So to set things up, if we go to window, there's several new window options that have just appeared. There's graph, graph inspector, and variables. All three of these things are necessary in order to work with in order to work with Bolt. So let's go ahead and open a graph window. And you'll see that this graph window, this is where we're going to be making our graphs, right? That's what they call them. They call them graphs, and they're composed of the different units. So instead of having this floating window on top of everything, we want this to be in a place where it can be pretty large, like say down here at the bottom, and where we can, so we can make use of all this stuff. So the way we do that, the way we move a tab from one floating window to here is you hover over the word graph, you click on it, and you just drag, and we want it to be in the same, we just want it to be one of the panes in here. And so you can see it's like trying to glue it in a bunch of different places, but if I just bring it up here in this dark gray bar and drop it, then I have the graph, the console, and the projects all in one pane. So I've got those. So then the next two things I need to do is I'm going to go to Window, and I'm going to say Graph Inspector, and then I'm going to go to Window and Variables, right? So now I've got these two other floating windows, and these I want to be in one panel. But I want them to be separate from this because I'm going to want to be able to look at my graph inspector and to be able to create variables. And there's in the end, right, one of the nice things is you can rearrange this any way you want. But it's good to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab variables first. And honestly, it might make sense to put the variables at the bottom of the hierarchy pane, right? So I can have it snap here. And then I'm going to have the graph inspector come down here to this, so it's filling in this right side over here of the bottom pane. So it's not across the top like this, it's just this chunk here. And then I'm going to go ahead and hover over here to stretch this over because I don't need that much space on here, right? And so, okay, so now we are ready. I want to show you the last thing we need to do to start to apply a script to something. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on I'm going to click on the sphere, and you should do it in the scene that we're working in. It's going to be our player. And so we're going to go ahead and select the sphere, and then we're going to come down here and we're going to click on Add Component. And under Bolt, we are going to create a flow machine. There's two different types of machine, and the flow machine is basically, right, it's the code that's going to be running. And the state machine's a little different, and honestly I'm still learning what the state machine does, but I understand the flow machine. So let's go ahead and click on flow machine, and what that's going to do, it's going to create two components. It's going to create a variables component, and it's going to create this flow machine component. And the last thing we need to do setup is we need to create what's called a macro. There's the option to do an embed or a macro. 90% of the time, apparently, we want to use macros, so we're going to do that. We're going to click on the New button over here. And when we do that, it's going to pop up a Save dialog, and so we could create a new folder inside our project that could just be called Bolt. Or you could put it in anything else, but I'm just going to say Bolt, and then I'm going to save this as graph. We'll just call it graph 1 for now, or let's call it player graph, as that is what you will be working with. I'm going to hit save. Oh, apparently I have to save it. Oops, I didn't mean to put this in here. Well, I'm going to put it in here. And because I also misspelled this, let's go ahead and save that again. I meant to put that Bolt folder in the assets folder, but I failed to do that. So just go ahead and save it in the assets folder. And you'll see that as soon as I do that, I've got something has popped up in here, and this graph inspector has some things in it now. And so you'll see that there's the start event and update event. And if you click on them, they kind of tell you what they do in the graph inspector. And that's one of the important things here is having this inspector is sort of like having the manual or the reference guide right next to what you're doing. So when you have no idea what these different things do, this gives you a better hint. Okay, so in the next tutorial, we'll actually go into what happens in here.